Good morning. Happy Mother's Day to everyone out there. I hope you're doing good. Whether you're a mom or not, we're celebrating all women today, and we're grateful that you're here. So I'm glad that you showed up, and you look great, by the way. Everybody's ready for their portraits. Anyone here, does anyone here like magic tricks? A few, a couple of you? Okay, most of us, I think, really like magic tricks. And I always wanted to perform magic when I was growing up, and even when I got older. Why is someone laughing out there already? But it takes a lot of practice, right? And it's a lot of work with your hands, and something I never bothered to really get to know too well. But I did notice that it was a lot of fun to do with my kids because they're so easy to trick. And so I would take my kids and I would just take a quarter like this one right here. Can you guys see this quarter? And I would just go like this. And then I would go like this. And they're like, wow, Poppy, where did it go? And then I would go back, and I'd show them again, And they'd be like, look, check it out. And so when they got a little bit older, they're like, let me see behind your back, And they start looking around, and they like, let me see your other hand. They start to get more clever. So I had to come up with a couple other little tricks that I thought would be really great. So then I would go like this, and I would take my hand, and I would just stuff it right in there, stuff that coin in there, and then I would go like that, and it would disappear. And then they'd go, wow, what's up with that, Poppy? And then I go, watch. And then I just take it right up from behind their ear, and there it showed up again. Now, you guys didn't laugh or clap, so you know how bad I am at this, but it fooled my kids. That was the thing. I would try more, but that's about the extent of the magic tricks that I know, and I'd pull it out, and they'd still say, Poppy, pull a coin out from behind my ear. And so I would just do the little trick, and I'd pull it out, and I'd go, here you go, and they would be excited about that. And so if you thought you were going to see a magic act, I'm sorry if I disappointed, by the way, okay? But I'm going to work on it. I am going to work on it when I get home later today. But the cool thing about doing a trick in front of a kid is they think it's impossible, don't they? They're like, how did you do that? And I love watching magic on TV because I'm always trying to figure out, how did you do that? And some of the shows that I really like, by the way, I don't know if you've ever seen this, because one of the things about magic is you have to be really good at sleight of hand. And there's this guy I've seen on YouTube, and he does this thing with card dealing, and this guy is so quick and so good, he does it right in front of you, and you can't even figure it out. But that takes a lot of practice. But there was this guy, anybody remember this guy here, the Masked Magician? This was a series that came out, it was called Breaking the Magician's Code, and he would show how the tricks were performed, and he kept a mask because he didn't want people to hate him, all these magicians. And so that's a cool one to watch. But you ever watch this one too, Fool Us? Go to the next slide, with Penn and Teller. If you haven't, you got to check out the show. So what they do is magicians come up on stage, and they do all types of things. There's mentalists, there's card tricks, there's all sorts of stuff. And they all try to fool Penn and Teller, and if they can fool them, then they kind of win. We couldn't see what you did. We didn't know how you did it. And so that's a fun one to watch. You can still watch it on YouTube if you want. But wouldn't it be cool for a moment if we could figure out our marriages, right? Like that? Because once in a while, doesn't it seem like they're a little bit impossible to figure out, like a magic trick? There's well, wait, what just happened here? You ever been in one of those conversations and you're just thinking, your spouse and you walk away just wondering, why? Why did that just happen? Or what just happened, right? And you're like, this is crazy. If it could just be revealed to me, then maybe it would be easier for me to handle my marriage, to navigate this thing that we called marriage. And if you've had enough of those kind of wonder why or what conversations, then you might be thinking marriage is just impossible to have the marriage that I really want. Have you ever thought that for a moment? You're in your marriage and you go, when's it going to be what I always hoped and dreamed it would be? I'm waiting for that moment. And it seems like there's a lot of groundwork that still needs to be laid. And maybe if that's happened to you long enough, you've kind of almost given up on marriage. Have you ever been in that place? Don't raise your hand if your spouse is near you, okay? I don't want you to, we have a woman that's, okay, your spouse isn't with you, good, okay. But we don't want to raise our hands, but sometimes we're like, well, I'm almost giving up that it's not going to be what I would hoped it would be. And maybe we resign to the idea, this is just it. This is the way my marriage is going to be for the rest of my life, and that's it. That's the way it is. And we're just going to have to live that way. But what if I told you that you could have the marriage that you want? What if I said you could do that? And it's not just some magic trick, but that you just have to realize how it works, right? Just like magic gets dispelled once we know how it works, right? It's no fun anymore. You're like, I saw what happened. He's got a string, or I saw that. He had 2 coins, or whatever it is, right? We figure it out. Then you go, okay, that's how it worked. what if I told you marriage, if we realized how it worked, it would dispel a lot of that mystery and help us live the marriage that we really want, have the life that we wanted. No matter how satisfied with you are with your marriage, no matter who you are, you could always make it a little bit better, couldn't you? Because there's some of us like, oh, okay, we were happy with our marriage, and baby, I love you, and I'm very happy with our marriage. But there's always things that we can improve, right? And everything. And if you asked her to stand up, she'll tell you right away, yes, okay? Having a marriage, a great marriage, may seem like an impossibility, but it would be helpful if we understood this one thing, and that is that God designed marriage. Do you realize that God created it? All the way back when he created man and woman, he actually created marriage at the same time. How many of you believe that God does things on purpose? All right, pretty much all of us. So if he created marriage, then it probably has a purpose to it, right? It probably has a meaning behind it, and if we could discover that, we could change our marriage. Now, we're in this series, To Become One, how God makes the impossible possible, and that's what it's all about. It's based on when God created man and woman, and he created the relationship of marriage to begin with. And the idea of two people becoming one, as we said before, seems like an impossibility. I mean, two individuals, how do they become one? How is that going to happen? And yet, this is God's plan. Imagine this, just two people. They come from different places. They come from different cultures. Maybe they have different expectations. They come from different financial situations, the way they grew up, so they don't spend money the same way. Or maybe they have different outlooks on life, or even have different experiences. Any person who's been in a relationship or married for more than a week understands how difficult this is, right? All of a sudden, yeah, I thought it was going to be easy, because when we grew up watching Disney fairy tales, we think you live happily ever after. Notice that it stops there. They never go any farther because they want to leave it there, because they don't even know how to write the rest of it, right? It's just, how does that happen? But not only that, but men and women are just so different. It's not just two individuals, but we're different as men and women. And that's why we started the series off 3 weeks ago on asking the question, what's the question that women are asking their whole life? That was the premise of the first message. If you haven't heard that message, you need to go back onto YouTube or our website and listen to that. And then the second week, the question was, what is the question every man is asking in his life? And so women, if you didn't hear that one and you missed it, I want to encourage you, go to YouTube or go to our website. It's going to give you so much information and an eye-opening experience that's just going to help you with your marriage. But we're going to tackle a little bit more today. And when it comes to life, we naturally think of ourselves first, don't we? We are all dressed up, or most of us are dressed up today to get a family portrait. And when that portrait get downloaded or you look at it, the first person you're going to look for is who? Ourselves, right? You're going to look for you. You're like, well, how did I look, right? We're concerned about ourselves first, and that's natural. I'm not saying anything bad about that. But when you were young and you grew up in a family, you were still an individual, and you had your own hopes and dreams, and you did whatever you wanted, and you went wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted, didn't you? Like after your parents kind of let go, and that's what we're used to, living our lives the way we want to live our life. That's how it's been. But then when we got married, we all know that things are going to change. We expect that because it's going to be different. Now we got two people living under the same house. We share that house. We share our finances. Maybe share the same bathroom maybe. We share our French fries. Ladies, why do we have to share our French fries with you? Can I ask that question? Right? You want our, right. Somebody said we only want your French fries. Listen, I just want you to understand, a man orders French fries, and he's calculating, can I eat all this amount? And then you disrupt it by starting to eat some of those fries. And he gets frustrated. And he's like, lady, if you wanted them, I would have just bought you some too. We don't want our own. And we share our time together. And we have new commitments now that are going to involve someone else. That's what we're expecting when it comes to marriage. But maybe, perhaps, God's intention was something more. And so we're going to go back all the way back to creation. We're going to reread some of the verses that we've gone over before. I put them in your outline, but they're also here on the screen. And the Lord God formed the man out of the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living being. And the Lord said, it's not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. And the Lord caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That's our verse that we're focusing on for this whole series. And they were both naked, and the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. I want you to remember that last line, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and unashamed. We see here that God creates man and woman, right? That's what we just read. He creates man and woman. And then he creates the first social institution that was ever created, and that is marriage. Putting the two of you together, and you are going to become one. They will become one flesh. The purpose of this oneness in a marriage is twofold. One, it was to populate the earth. We kind of talked a lot about that before, but look at what Malachi says, the prophet Malachi. Did the Lord make you one with your wife? Didn't he make you one with your wife, he's saying? In the body and in spirit, you are his. And what does he want? Why does he want this oneness for you? Godly children from your union. That's what he's seeking. So guard your heart, remain loyal to the wife of your youth. So he's saying, look, we're going to populate this earth, and we want people who are going to follow after me. That's what the purpose of this union is. But it's also something more than that. You see, most of us look at that verse, and if you're like me, you're thinking of the honeymoon, right? We're like, oh, wow, I'm looking forward to that wedding day because that's when we're going to be one. And we think of it as this physical union, don't we? Of course, they become one flesh. It's only natural. And so God is speaking, though, to something greater than that when he talks about this oneness. He's talking about you no longer being one individual, but two. We actually become one. Why? Why do we say that? Because this verse, by the way, it's Genesis 2:24, where he says they become one flesh, is used throughout the New Testament. In this particular place, back in Ephesians, Paul's writing to this one area, to the Ephesians, this one area of Scripture addresses the man and the woman, and he says this, for this reason, quoting the verse in Genesis, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. There it is. This is a great mystery. Why is it a mystery? If it was only about becoming one flesh and a physical intimacy, why is it then a mystery? He says, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. He gives us a clue here. There's this weird thing that happens, or this very interesting thing, maybe you can call it even phenomenal, a wonderful thing. When you come to know the Lord, the Bible says in Ephesians chapter 1 that he deposits a little bit of the Holy Spirit inside of you. And somehow we are made one with God. Christ is made one with his church. And he's saying, that's the union I'm talking about. And he's saying that same union applies to you and that other person. Imagine that. You are stuck with this, I don't want to say stuck. You are connected. You are bound with this other person like no other person on the planet. That's what God is saying here. You become one. This second purpose of marriage is found in the end of the verse that we had read in Genesis, where I said, remember this, that the two are naked and they were unashamed, right? Naked and unashamed. There were no barriers between Adam and Eve. When God brought them to each other, they didn't even have any clothes, ladies and gentlemen. They were there with nothing between them, no barrier, nothing hidden. And that was not just physically, but it was also meant to be spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. This speaks to us at our core need, every single person's core need for intimacy with another human being. And if we were to do a little bit of theological lecturing, we could talk about the fact that the two greatest commandments, Jesus said, are putting your God first, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and love what? Others as yourself. The two core needs that each and every one of us have. It's another message that I can tell you another time, but those are the core needs that we have. And so he says this speaks to that core need to be intimate with another human being. And isn't that what we want deep down inside? When you thought about marriage when you were little, you thought, man, someday, at least when you got over the fact that you thought boys were icky and girls were icky, right, and they had cooties, you started thinking, man, someday I'm going to be with some woman or some guy, right? We were thinking, and they're going to be like my perfect soulmate, right? That's what we think. And what is that expressing? It's expressing that we want to be connected on a certain level with them. We want to be accepted by another person who truly knows us. Think about that for a minute. Naked and unashamed. They know every single flaw. Not just what our physical bodies are like, but even the flaws that we have emotionally. Even the flaws that we have, we don't measure up in certain areas. And when we make mistakes, we want them to accept us anyway. Isn't that what we want? Aren't we looking for that one person who knows us that well and says, you know what? It's okay though. I still love you. And that's what is happening. That's what God is talking about. And that's what happens. how does this happen? How does he make us naked and unashamed and create this oneness? Is because it only works well if we are one. That's what God is saying. You have to be one in order to experience this core need, this core desire of having someone accept you no matter what. The only way to create that was by joining up the two people. In marriage, God is uniting you emotionally and spiritually on a level like no other. Your life will fundamentally change the day you say, I do. Every time I counsel people, I say, you may think you're close right now, but the day you say, I do, everything is going to change. Because God is doing something that we kind of don't fully understand. Because it's on a level that's hard for us. It was a mystery, but it is true. Our lives will fundamentally change. And although God did this spiritually, it has to be understood mentally. And so the first point in your outline, please pull out your outlines. It's going to be up on the screen, but it's going to help you. If you fill in this and you keep it with you, it's going to help you remember this message. The oneness God created in marriage must be received mentally. Must be received mentally. We have to believe what God said about it and receive it, even though we can't see it, feel it, or touch it. A mental change must take place. Many married couples are still living like two individuals. And perhaps you've seen that. They're so used to being individuals that it carries over into their marriage. And we see things like prenuptial agreements. I mean, what is a prenuptial agreement explaining to somebody? I'm getting prepared for the time that we're no longer together, right? I mean, you're going into the marriage with one foot out the door. And I can understand why someone may want to do that, but it's just telling us what's going on and what they believe about that marriage. Also, how about decade-long dating? Sometimes we're going on a decade, we're going on so many years, and it's like, okay, when are we going to make that full commitment and become one? Or the idea of divorce. Divorce rates are over 50%, both inside and outside the church. And people are in that mode where I still believe and think about me above all, instead of thinking about us as one. You see, when we think of ourselves as individuals, we look out for our own best interests. The wrong view of marriage has tainted our thinking on marriage. You know, I'd like to take us back to like the 50s and the 60s. And I think we were at a different time in America, at least. I don't know about the rest of the world. But there was a time where people stayed married, right? They stayed married. And so they worked it out, or they tried to work it out. But there was a problem with this. You see, they said, I'm going to do what I think is right, and I'm going to stay, and I'm not going to divorce that person. But the problem is, they also lived still like two individuals, two people under the same roof, living like individuals. Because they didn't do what their vow actually said, which was to love the other person. And then you had a generation coming out watching their parents be miserable because they stuck it out because either their kids were still with them and they said, well, it's good to have parents, right, with them, so we'll just stick it out till they're done. Or they just did it because they said, I don't want to break my marriage vow and get divorced, but they didn't bother to try to work on the marriage. And so the kids looked on and said, if that's what marriage is, my parents, what they did, I don't want anything to do with it, right? Because they were still individuals instead of thinking of themselves as one, because the oneness of marriage has to be received mentally. We have to change our way of thinking. The parents, though they didn't get divorced, they just really didn't keep their vows. They didn't honor the marriage as God had designed it, which is for us to be one. The difference between keeping a vow and not getting married, there's a difference between the two. A mental change has to take place. And truths, listen, by the way, listen to this statement for just a moment. Truths, any truth, right? They're only effective if they change our way of thinking, right? If we don't receive that truth, it never becomes active in our life, or it ever has the power in our lives. Listen to what Paul is writing, and this might enlighten you on this verse a little bit. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do we renew our mind? We receive truth and say, I'm going to hold on to it. You see, the things we believe about God and in the Bible is what we take on faith, means we believe it because God said it. Doesn't mean it wasn't true. And then you will be able to test and approve what is good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. Our minds must be renewed to think differently. Recognizing that you are one, listen, changes everything. It'll change everything in your marriage. When you do that, here's what happens. And I may have used this illustration before, and if it's new to you again, I just want to see, maybe it's a fresh reminder. But we have two different arms, right? But there's still one with your body. But if your right arm were to be broken, okay, and it wasn't working right, now it's in a cast, would your left arm get upset at it? You can't pick things up. Start hitting it. Like, what's wrong with you? You know, carry your own weight. You can't scratch my back anymore. You can't do what you're supposed to do. No, your left arm doesn't do that, does it? Your left arm takes care of it because it's hurt now. It can't do what it could do. So it might bandage it. It might fix it, dress the wounds. And if your right hand is the hand that you use to write, your left hand figures out how to do that, doesn't it? And if your right hand was the one that you fed yourself, your left hand figures it out. It makes up for where there is lack in the other because the two arms, the two hands, recognize that they're one. I think one of the biggest things that we can do in a relationship is to grasp this concept, because this concept will change everything. Looking at each other as one doesn't just highlight faults and failures anymore, because it's so easy to look at the things that are going on in someone else's life and say, oh yeah, you need to change. You need to be something different. You need to learn this or do that. And when we think of ourselves as one, I believe it defeats what I call the lie of Satan. I call it the lie of Satan because it happens in everybody's relationship, and I'm sure it happened to you at one point. And what this is, it goes something like this, the lie of Satan. You see something your spouse doing that you don't like. Or maybe you got in an argument, you guys can't fix it, and you're just like, oh man, I can't stand this any longer. And you say this one verse, this is the lie of Satan, I can't live like this any longer. I've said that in my life. I don't know if I said it in my marriage, but I've said that in my life. And all of us at one point or another, it starts to sneak in there. Yeah, I can't live like this. And that's the lie of Satan coming in there, trying to change our thoughts, saying, okay, this isn't working. And the way we defeat that is because we believe that we are one. That phrase has been the seed of countless divorces. I was in a new believers class, and I was a group leader. So we'd be like 100 people at this church or more, and then they would break off into groups, and I was leading this one group, and one gentleman came to me, and he was divorced, and we're talking in the group, and he's talking about his marriage, and he says, you know what, I don't even know why I'm divorced with my wife anymore. I'm not sure. I actually really like her. And I said, well, what happened? He goes, I don't know. One day we were arguing, someone mentioned divorce, and the next thing you know, I'm signing papers. It's like they let the enemy come in and whisper this one thing and said, I can't live like this anymore. And I'm going to tell you something. Yes, you can live like that. God can change that situation for you. But we have to believe it. We have to receive the oneness that God wants to do in our life. If we can get this mindset right in our heads, it will revolutionize how you look at your wife. It really will, or your husband. It will change everything if you say, yes, we're one. Because we're not enemies anymore. We are together. You may have never thought of it this way. And you may be realizing now, okay, there is a difference. I never thought of it that way, and I don't know if I applied that to my life. But once you believed and hoped for this, that you too would be naked and unashamed, right? We did, because we were younger. And here's the thing, no matter what, you have to always believe this. You have to always come back to it. You have to fight for it because there's a battle in your mind. It has to be renewed every day if you're in a relationship and you're in that marriage, that we are one. We constantly need to guard against this separation of oneness. And this is one of the things that will help you. It's the second point in your outline. And that is that oneness means always assuming that your spouse has good intentions toward you. Always assuming that your spouse has good intentions for you. Somewhere along the line, we can all fall into the trap of believing that our spouse is out to get us. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, like they're the enemy, but sometimes it happens. And when that begins to happen, that we think, okay, they did that on purpose, right? You ever thought that? Like, oh, she left that there. She knew it was there. You ever have that? Or oh man, he knew. I've told him about this 100 times, right? And we're thinking they do it on purpose. And when we start to do that, then we begin to believe that everything they do is an attack, or it's an insult, or it's meant to harm us. And this can be a very dangerous place to be. I shared this with you before, but I'm going to share it again. But when we first got married, my wife and I didn't live together. We moved in together, and we were learning a lot about each other. And I remember early on in our marriage, she said one day, John, we need to talk. And it was toward the evening, and I said, we need to talk. Now, every time I'd heard we need to talk, guys, have you ever heard that in a good sense? I'm like, what is she going to tell me about? And I just started getting nervous. And I started getting fidgety. And I started literally anxiously talking. And I got us into this big fight. And this fight lasted like a half an hour or 45 minutes. I have no idea what I did. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm in this middle. And then I finally, we get through it somehow. I don't know, she calms me down. And at the end, as I'm breathing, I'm like, okay, all right, baby, what is it that you wanted? And she says, I just wanted to know what you want for breakfast tomorrow. things can be taken two different ways, can't they? And I learned a very valuable lesson that day. And now when she says we need to talk, I'm like, baby, what is it? Please tell me. I want to know. It's changed my outlook. But things can be taken two different ways. There's two ways of taking things, a bad way and a good way. Listen to what the Apostle Paul says. Now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Like this is something we need tattooed somewhere on our bodies or the inside of our eyelids so that we can remember that. Because he's saying this is just for the general Christians, right? And normally we would try to apply that, but we also need to apply that to our marriages. Like dwell on the good thing. If things can be taken two different ways, take it the best way as it possibly can. And so that we can change our minds on what's going on. Because when you believe the best, and you take the option of the best is what they're trying to tell you, then it will change everything. It should be the same way with our husbands and wives. Have you ever noticed how we often give ourselves a break when it comes to our mistakes? You ever blow something and you're just like, oh man, I blew it, but I didn't mean it. Like, what is it? It's like, we didn't mean it, so it's okay. And I'm not saying whether it's bad or good. I'm just saying that's what we naturally do. We look at our intentions, but when it comes to our spouse, we don't look at the best side for that. Oh, maybe you intended it that way, but this is what you did, right? And maybe we just need to go, okay, I don't know why you did it, baby, but I'm sure you love me, and there was a good reason for it, right? And I remember early on in our marriage, and you're learning that my wife is much more spiritually mature than I am, okay, through all this, but she was able to dispel those things in our marriage and defeat this enemy mindset in our lives. Like, I'm not your enemy, John. And she would say things just like that. She's like, listen, I'm going to tell you something, and it's not to attack you, okay? I'm not your enemy. And she would premise this, so I would say, the reason I'm about to tell you something is so that we as one can get better. Not because I want to pick on you, not because I want to bring this up and just throw it in your face, but if we can kind of get past this hurdle, this will help our marriage even more. So I want you to know it's not about attacking you. I actually love you. Because the truth is, every single one of us is flawed, aren't we? Who here doesn't have any flaws? I was waiting for me to pick on somebody who raised their hand. That's Richard in the back. But listen, I'm just joking around, right? We're all flawed. And that means you bring those flaws into a marriage. That means your marriage is flawed. And that means when you talk to somebody, it is going to bring up stuff that hurts once in a while. And the person you're going to blame is the person that brought it up, isn't it? I mean, I know it. I have flaws. My wife puts them out, and I'm like mad. I should be mad at me, and I'm getting mad at her because she pointed it out. But she's doing it for the right reason. And if we have the right thing, we assume the best, then it will help us get through those first parts of the conversation and get to the point where we really can communicate and we really can work on the things that are going on in our marriage. And at least then we can assume, so at least we can assume that things are going, that they mean the best and that we're working on our relationship. When you are one, it means you are one of the same team. You're on the same team. And so this last thing I want you to know is that one in marriage means physical intimacy is a priority. Physical intimacy is a priority. God gave us a very special gift in physical intimacy because we get to these moments where we do, and I warn everybody in premarital counseling, I say this, you're going to love your spouse, but there are moments you're not going to like them, right? Because there are going to be these moments where you are flawed and they point it out. And physical intimacy, though, is something that we all look forward to in our marriages, don't we? And we're hoping it's always going to stay the same. I remember when we got married, my wife and I ran off to Mexico. That's where we got married. Now, I would say we ran off, but we did a destination wedding. So we had some relatives and people that were there. And it was fabulous. It was awesome. Everything was on the same, resort. So we went to the little chapel. We got married. We took pictures on the beach. They had a room where we did our reception. And then when it was over, we danced the night away. And then we went to our hotel room, our room area. And my brother serenaded us as we went up I don't remember if we went to the elevator or she made me carry her up the stairs. All I remember is I had to carry her. I worked out for a year. I did. So I could be ready for this moment to carry my wife. And so there I am, and I carry her through the threshold. The door opens up. I mean, my mother-in-law had paid for like champagne and strawberries, and there was leaf petals all over the place, rose petals. And you're at a resort, so they already make it amazing. And there was like this towel that they would form into some type of animal on the bed, right? You've seen that? And there's candles lit. And it was such a great night, and then we had saved ourselves for marriage. So we're looking forward to this moment. There's also a little bit of nervousness involved, and so she's kind of a little bit nervous, and I'm kind of moving in closer, and slipping off the dress, ladies and gentlemen, right? And I lay her down on the bed, and I'm thinking, and we're keeping moving forward, and suddenly my leg's starting to get a little warm, and it's getting really hot. And then I looked down, I kicked over the candle, and the bed was on fire. I love to tell people our marriage bed at night, that was on fire, baby. But not the way you think. Talk about putting a damper on the moment, right? We jump up, we're thinning that thing out. Towel was burnt. Anyway, when I said that physically we have to come together as one, I think we all thought, yeah, that's a no-brainer, right? Like when marriage comes, it's all going to work. I mean, we've got parts that fit. Like this is the thing we're looking forward to, right? This is the part of the marriage we're like, yeah, we want this to happen. Does it really need to be said that this is what we're looking forward to? And some of us, this is why we got married. But on the marriage day, sometimes it always isn't what you think it is, right? On the wedding day, this is what everyone is waiting for, to get back to the room. But even on the night, sometimes it doesn't go well. Listen, it's important to note this by the Apostle Paul's writing to the church in 1 Corinthians. He says this, let the husband render to his wife the affection due to her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. This is the very important part. Do not deprive one another except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer and come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. When I read this, I was like, this is pretty awesome. God is instructing us to have sex. It is. Did you just read this? Do not deprive one another except with consent. The only reason you should ever not be having sex, God says, is because that you may give time for fasting and prayer and then come together again soon, okay? Don't even wait very long. One of them says, don't wait very long. Don't even make this a very long time and come back together in a relationship, because it gives a foothold to the devil. It's like this opens up this opportunity. I believe the purpose of sex is not just for procreation. And if that's what you ever thought it was, God gave us sex so that we could procreate. Yes, that's one of them, but it's not. There's something more than that. There's another purpose. You see, for a man and a woman to connect on a physical and emotional level, God gave us this. To connect in intimacy that is impossible any other way. I mean, think about it, right? You're your most vulnerable in that moment. There you are, naked and unashamed together. And sex has the power to unite two people in a way that nothing else can. It will transcend the physical, the emotional, the spiritual. That moment, that afterglow, if you will, in that one moment, right? You know what the moment I'm talking about. You're laying with your spouse. You're emotionally tied to that person. You will never be as intimately connected with that person than anybody else on that planet. No one else will have that same connection together as you, and you've been there and you felt it. And this is one of the reasons why God reserves sex for marriage, by the way. And that's another whole message that I'll tell you at another time. But physical intimacy is so important to unite a couple emotionally. After you argue with each other, after she or he points out that thing and you're like a little bit angry with them, it's important to then come together and not wait very long. That's what he's telling us. Because physical intimacy has a way of erasing all those feelings, doesn't it? There's something about it that just unites us together. And here's sometimes the problem. We want to be connected emotionally with them, and sometimes we do an end run around the problem. Instead of dealing with it, we just kind of jump into bed, hope we feel better, and then we still have the problem to deal with, though. But God gave us this as a gift to say to us, listen, guys, talk about the things that are issues that you have between you. And I know you're not going to feel great at this time, but then don't wait very long. Come back together, and it's going to erase the feelings because you already dealt with the issue. It is a gift that God is giving you and me to stay connected to that one person like nobody else on this planet. Here's the thing about sex sometimes. You have to work at it. If you've been married for a while, you realize this. I got some crazy stories about trying to get pregnant. If some of you are there, you're like, man, this is like work. I'm punching a clock or whatever. But some people may be more compatible in this area than others. If you are with your spouse, you know that you may have great humor together, right? Or maybe they don't share your humor. Or maybe you have the same vision. You both like to be outdoors. Or maybe you both like to be homebodies. And you're compatible in different areas. And sometimes you're not as compatible in different areas. And it's the same thing with sex. Just because God created you to have the parts and to have the hormones and to be that person doesn't mean it will always be simple for the two of you. Sometimes you have to work at it. Physical intimacy between Carolina and I has only gotten better. I mean, look where it started, okay? We had a bed on fire, okay? And over time, it got better. But the truth is, I'll be honest with you, okay? And I've asked that we could share this, that we had to work at it because we were not as compatible in this area as we thought and hoped we were going to be. I remember when we didn't connect so well in communication when I'd first come home in those early days. And I'd come home and I would just be trying to give her hints and innuendos. And because we were kind of different, she didn't quite get them. And she was expecting different things than I was thinking. And I would just say, well, do you want to have sex? And she'd be like, no. And I'm like, what, you don't have sex? No, don't just say, do you want to have sex? Like, can you romance me a little? You know, like rub my back, do this, that, or the other thing. So then I would try new things because I didn't know. Like, we just weren't connecting the same way. I mean, I'm just like, let's just go for it, you know, and of course she isn't. And so I would do things like I would come home and just try stupid things like, so do we have an appointment tonight? Like, what do you mean? The appointment with Dr. John? What? What are you talking about? And I'd be like, sex, honey. Do you want to have sex? Then she would get all frustrated. We go to bed. We wake up in the morning. And she'd go, I really wish we had sex last night. And I said, well, why didn't we? Why didn't we? Listen, sometimes it can be very complicated, okay? And some of you already understand this. And I just wanted to share our souls with you because you know what happens sometimes? We go to a place and everybody looks like they got it together, don't they? Like, there's no problem. It's supposed to be natural. It's supposed to work that way. Listen, you have to work at it. You have to work at it. But it's so worth it. And God wants you to work at it. That's the verse that we just read. There could be so many barriers to sexual intimacy in our lives, like communication issues sometimes, or heavy schedules. You guys, certain seasons of life can get so difficult, but you got to work at it. Or there's constant kids. Man, you got kids. You throw them in the mix. You got to make sure that door's locked, right? Or there's physical issues sometimes that are between us. Or maybe there's conflict issues. Or sometimes there's even sin in our lives that's keeping us from that intimate moment. All of these work against the emotional connection of physical intimacy in our lives. But I know, as much as my wife and I have to work at it, some of you guys do too, right? And it's okay. But it's not okay not to work at it. You see, we purpose to make sure that we do have this in our lives. It's so important to make this a priority in your life, to not neglect it, to be constantly connected at a level that transcends other acts of oneness. If you guys were yesing or shaking your head when I said, you know what happens at that afterglow moment, then that connection is something God has given us and He doesn't want us to forsake it. It's that thing that renews our relationship with that person. It gives us that closeness with them. And there's a lot that sometimes comes before the physical intimacy. But He's saying whatever it takes to get there, get there. Do whatever it takes so that your marriage will stay close and stay connected. You know, one of the biggest gauges on our dashboard of our marriage is physical intimacy in your life. And when people used to come to me for counseling, as I was a pastor for 19 years, one of the things I would ask them was, when's the last time you were physical? Some people, it was a week. Some people said 3 months. Some said over a year. And you're looking at that and you're going, there's something wrong here. There's a problem. And what I want to say to you today is if this dashboard, if your gauge is on empty, it's telling you something. When your car gas gauge is on empty, it's saying you're about to run out of gas. And when this is empty in your relationship, it should be a warning sign to us that something needs to be taken care of in our relationship, whatever it is. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. But God has given us this gift to keep us one with our spouse. One of the most fascinating areas of the Bible comes at the end of King David's life. And guys, if you ever want to look it up, it's really awesome. In 2 Samuel 23, you can check it out. We're going to quote from there in a minute. But he lists all these people that ran with him. Like this was his posse. These were the guys that helped out David, especially when he was on the run. And they did amazing feats. In fact, he's called David's mighty men, this list of this area, this one section. And it talks about their gifts, their feats of heroism that they did while they were together. Killing of giants, exhibiting of these amazing acts of strength and courage. Some of them going down into a pit on a snowy day, defeating a lion with just their hands and a spear. Just amazing things that they did. And among them is this guy. His name is Eleazar, the son of Dodo. Okay? Listen to his story. I put it in the outline. And after him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, one of the 3 mighty men with David when he defied the Philistines who were gathered there for battle. And the men of Israel had retreated. He arose and attacked the Philistines until his hand was weary and his hand stuck to the sword. So the scene comes where they're being attacked by the Philistines, they're at war, but all the Israelites retreat, and they're in this barley field, and there's Eleazar, the son of Dodo, and then there's David hanging out together, and they are fighting all the Philistines, the whole army. I mean, it boggles my mind to try to picture this. Right? What is happening? I mean, how are the bodies like piling up? I mean, I don't want to get too gross, but it's like, how did this even work out? Did they have to step to the side, or were people climbing over each other? And yet these 2 guys, there they are fighting, and they're going on, and this is lasting for hours. And it says after these hours that his hand stuck to his sword. And that word stuck is this word cleave, or dabak is what it's called. And it means to be joined together, pursue hard, to follow after. And it's the same exact word that God uses in Genesis 2:24 for being made one. Jesus actually quotes this when the Pharisees are asking about marriage, and he quotes again, going back